Hello! Welcome, dear cloud builders. Welcome to the next episode of our show. We called it Build Up. And this is mix of sessions, fire chats, Q&A, and just discussions with technical experts from different cloud companies, cloud vendors, cloud consultancies, cloud developers, everyone. This is the community. This is community for learning and inspiration. We want to share our knowledge. We want to hear from you, and let's learn cloud all together. Our agenda for today. By the way, about me, I'm Salnikov. I stream straight from my home studio in Oslo, Norway. I work in Microsoft as developer engagement lead, and today I'm super pleased to lead and to moderate this event. So my role today is more organizational. My pleasure to support this cloud builders community by doing this. Next 1.5 hours, it's pretty packed agenda. So we have 2 technical sessions. We have 1 fireside chat, and we have 1 dedicated Q&A session in details. The show started by Darko, Meszaros, developer advocate at Amazon Web Services. He will present about infrastructure as code in AWS. In his session, Darko will look into infrastructure as code solutions, best practices, and patterns they use in Amazon Web Services. Next session by Dmytro Vedetskyi, lead DevOps at Intellias. He will present about Kafka monitoring by Zabbix. Next session is Fire Chat. Actually, this will be me as moderator and Nikhil, Barthwal, tech lead from Google Cloud Platform. We'll focus our discussion on DevSecOps, and I encourage you to prepare your questions. So we start our discussion by introducing this concept, but we really want to solve your problems. By the way, I love the concept of this event. It's called BYOP, bring your own problem, and we'll solve it. Next, we'll have dedicated Q&A session again by Darko. We expect lots of questions about infrastructure as code, about how that works in AWS and how that works in cloud in general, all technologies, all libraries, tools, frameworks around it. It's really, really hot topic these days. So Darko will have dedicated Q&A session based on your questions. Today's sessions will be recorded, so you will not miss anything. You always can return to all these videos when you can. And you will receive the link in your emails in just a few days. How to join Cloud Builders community? Lots of different options. First, we have a Telegram channel, and you'll see the link to this channel multiple times through this event. Plus, subscribe to the YouTube channel to not miss any single episode of Cloud Builders. Last but not least, in the end of event, we'll give a prize, special giveaway from our main partner company called Intellias. You could participate in this raffle by filling the form. Again, you'll find the link in the description of the event. And to finalize, around I will not mention the exact time, right? Because we are online and you can join us from any point on the world. So approximately after 1.5 hours of technical sessions and discussions, we'll have special after party, and just when we gather in Zoom and have just informal conversations among us, among visitors, among technical experts. So stay with us. Without any further delay, let me introduce our first speaker, Darko, Meszaros, developer advocate at Amazon Web Services. He's a senior developer advocate focusing on Central and Eastern Europe. He shares his passion and technological know-how with engineers, developers, and of course, communities around the world. If something can be automated, Darko will automate it. Mainly he's focusing towards DevOps and management tools, where automation, pipelines, and efficient developer tools is the name of the game. Click less, code more, and do not repeat yourself. This is mantra of Darko. Yes, so please welcome on stage Darko. This virtual stage is yours, and don't forget to send the questions. Just use chat. We are super keen on answering all your questions, on solving all your problems. Let's build this proper discussion, two-way channel. Darko, welcome.
Thank you very much, Maxim. First of all, thank you very much for the amazing introduction, and thank you everybody here for hosting me as part of this Cloud Builder meetup event, whatever you would like to call it. Excellent. So first thing, I can see the chat. So I have there's a delay between YouTube and myself. So but feel free to ask questions, and if I kind of glimpse a question, I'm happy to answer. But that being said, I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to try to present as best as possible in the given amount of time. So you should be able to see my presentation now, and I hope you can. Perfect. So today's talk is about infrastructure as code, or actually infrastructure is code. And it's going to be a bit light on the technical side. I'm going to show some best practices, some tools, some frameworks, but if you want to get more, there's a way to do it. So let me set the scene. The year is 2020. Everybody runs microservices, containers, serverless functions. Nobody does EC2 instances anymore. Well, actually they do, but everything is in a cloud. And I have a question for you, our lovely developer, our lovely engineer. How do you create your infrastructure? Do you do it with this? Or do you do it with this? If that can be visible. So are you doing it with your mouse? Are you doing it with your keyboard? Are you doing it with your code? Well, you should be doing it with code, and I'll explain why. So first question is, what is infrastructure as code? That's the main question of today, right? Well, first of all, let's actually step back a bit. What is infrastructure, right? According to Wikipedia, IT infrastructure is broadly defined as a set of information technology or IT components that are foundation of an IT service. Basically, all the networks, all the servers, all the data storage, all the databases, everything you run inside of your workload application, data center, whatever you would like to call it, that's IT infrastructure. What is code? Well, source code is actually a collection of code with or without comments. Hopefully it's comments and it's not JSON, written using a human readable, again, not JSON, programming language, not JSON. I'm sorry, I'll stop yelling at JSON. So how do we combine the two things? How do we combine source code and infrastructure? Well, there is a way, and there's a good reason for that. There's the amazing reason why you should combine infrastructure and code together to not build your infrastructure with your mouse or with clicking or with, calling up somebody, but you should actually define all of the stuff you want through code. Now, before I explain exactly how it looks right now, let's take another step back. How it used to be. I come from a background where I used to deploy servers. My previous role was server provisioning administrator, I believe that's the name. And I was basically tasked with deploying servers on random places, random data centers, right? Or actually somebody would go in there and rack them and stack them, connect the networks. And I would open up your favorite Java-based remote administration tool, mount an ISO, and install an operating system. So I remember once I was given the task of installing 500 physical servers in Fairbanks, Alaska. And it took me like a couple of months to do all of that because everything was manual, right? And you either had to call somebody, hey, can you provision me an IP address? Hey, can you make sure I'm connected to the network? Oh, can you enable backup for me? Or maybe the server is not good enough. The board is wrong. Can you replace the server? And with all that back and forth, it took a long time. Now imagine doing that 500 more times or replicating this environment into development environment. Imagine doing all of those things in a traditional way today at cloud scale. It doesn't work, right? So when you think about the infrastructure today, instead of thinking about this, well, actually, this is a representation of desktop computer. Well, actually, representations of servers from desktop computers, but never mind. don't think about the infrastructure like that. Think about the infrastructure like this. This is your infrastructure. Everything you do on the cloud today, no matter which vendor you're using, there's an API call for that. There's an API call being made when you deploy your infrastructure. Even if you go on the AWS console and click a bunch of buttons, you are still deploying your infrastructure through API, through code. So there is no more such things as infrastructure that is not code. All infrastructure is code. So that's very important that you understand. So today, instead of me racking and stacking and installing servers from an ISO, I write myself some lovely, well, this is TypeScript, some lovely TypeScript here, and I let TypeScript do the job for me, or actually let something else use TypeScript to do the job for me. So why infrastructure as code? Well, actually, this is a really nice way. Why should you do it? So instead of clicking a bunch of buttons, you describe your entire infrastructure, everything you wish to run, you describe it in a lovely template, a little file that contains your code where you define, I want this resource, I want that resource, and I want it to be configured in such a way. Then you let some magic happen and bam, you have resources. But why? Well, this gives you a really good, predictable, and repeatable way to deploy infrastructure, which is very important. Again, if you had to do something 500 times, it might be simple if you just write it down once and let it run. Additionally, you can use the same tooling, same framework, same pipeline, same text editor to deploy your infrastructure as you deploy your application, because especially in the serverless world, infrastructure is more part of your application than ever before. So if you're using Lambda functions, if you're using DynamoDB tables, if you're using Cognito, all of those parts of infrastructure are actually tight parts of your application. And finally, I mentioned this before, but replicating production into different types of stacks or different environments is crucial. So if you want your developers to have the ability to experiment, to try new things, you need development environments. How to create them? Well, you can click, but then you'll hate me. Or you can just take your infrastructure as code template and launch it again with some different set of parameters, and bam, you have a production workload. Now, this is something also I need to clear up, because a lot of people come to me and let's say, hey, Darko, this is nothing new. I wrote bash scripts in my life. I did some Python and had my VMware launch things. Absolutely. But there's two types of infrastructure as code. There is the imperative way, where you tell something what to do. So I take up my favorite AWS SDK. Let's say I do Python, and I take AWS Python SDK, and I use the Python SDK to launch EC2 instances. And every time I launch my script, it will launch an EC2 instance because I tell it what to do. But what if I could just describe not what I wanted to do, but what I want? I tell it, hey, what I need. I need an instance. I need a network. I need a database that needs to look like this. And this is the declarative approach. This is where you do stuff by describing things. Hey, that's all I need, and let anything else declare. And I see a comment here. Slavko writes, Darko is building infra by writing code on paper. Paper is bloat. So yeah, electricity is bloat. Use paper. But with this all out of the way, you might be wondering. Well, actually, I was introduced, but you may be wondering, who is this bald person and why is he screaming at the camera? Well, let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Darko Meszaros. I'm a developer advocate based in Berlin, Germany, and I work for AWS. I'm originally from Serbia, hence the different types of spelling of my name. You can pronounce it any way you want it, but it might be simpler to do it right now. I've had a long journey within the last 10 years. I moved, I think, 6 countries, well, 5 countries in the last 7 years. So from Serbia to Czech Republic to Malta to Ireland, and now living in Berlin, Germany. And if you want more of this, or more infrastructure as code, or more AWS tech and stuff, follow me on the social medias and YouTubes and Twitters and Twitches, whatever. I do a lot more content there. So if I cannot do everything in 20 minutes, I'll probably do it on Twitch or YouTube. So let me actually talk about the things, or how do you do infrastructure as code in AWS? There's a bunch of different options you can do and you can use. And I want to kind of talk you through some of them that can help make your life easier. Because let's be honest, everybody here is listening to me just because they want to learn something to make their day that much easier. So let's see what kind of tool exists out there that can help you do that. So let's talk about AWS CloudFormation and SAM. So AWS CloudFormation and SAM are two services that are very, very similar. Actually, SAM is, I would like to call him CloudFormation's younger brother, right? So let's actually look at CloudFormation. So CloudFormation is DOG, infrastructure as code service at AWS. This gives you the ability to write your infrastructure in languages such as JSON and YAML, right? Well, most likely YAML because nobody likes to read JSON. It's a really neat way to kind of describe these things, what you want. Then you create this thing called a stack, and you create a thing called a template. The template creates a stack, and that stack contains all of your resources that you defined in that template. So let's say I want to launch an EC2 instance. I say, hey, launch a resource type EC2 instance. This is the image I'm going to use. This is the key I'm going to use. This is the instance size I want. Pass it on to AWS or to CloudFormation, and CloudFormation does some API magic in the backend, and bam, you have an EC2 instance. But what's great about CloudFormation is also that if I want all of those resources gone, I go ahead and delete my stack, and CloudFormation successfully, hopefully, removes all the resources I've created. So if you're looking for a neat way to clean up resources after yourself, just by using infrastructure as code or CloudFormation in this case would be excellent. But let's say you are living in 2020 and you, instead of launching just additional databases and EC2 instances, you want to launch something serverless. Well, you can do it with CloudFormation, absolutely, but there's a better way. And that better way is, again, SAM, CloudFormation's younger brother, that basically is a framework. It's an open source framework that allows you to build serverless applications on AWS. Now, and you'll see this in a moment, that it looks almost identical as CloudFormation, but it has some features that will help you differentiate it from CloudFormation and make it much easier for you to work with serverless applications than pure vanilla CloudFormation. SAM on top has the SAM CLI, which is a lovely CLI utility that allows you to test your Lambda or serverless applications locally on your workstation by emulating Lambda. And it gives you the ability to properly deploy serverless applications through the command line and a whole bunch of bells and whistles. So in essence, it can do everything the CloudFormation can, but it's very much built for serverless applications. So moving on. This is an example of how CloudFormation code looks like. So as I said, it's a template that uses, in this case, YAML. It creates a stack from this template. In that stack, we have a bunch of resources that are configured in a specific way. Now, remember this code for a second. Remember it, memorize it now. And this is SAM. SAM is basically the same thing. The only difference with SAM is that it has specific resources or specific resource types for serverless applications. So within just 20 lines of code, in this case, I've been able to create a Lambda function, an IAM role, and an API gateway. Now, you can do the same thing in vanilla, pure CloudFormation, but it takes much longer. It takes much more code, takes much more effort, and things are much more streamlined here when it comes to serverless applications. So if you're focused purely on serverless, SAM is your choice. If not, CloudFormation is your choice, right? And all of these things, like any of the things I'm going to talk about today, belong in a pipeline. Yes, of course, I can all write it on my lovely laptop or on my computer back there. But to have a proper setup to deploy your infrastructure, you need to deploy it through a pipeline. You need to treat your infrastructure code as any other application code. You need to commit it to a repository. You need to version control it. You need to test the code. You need to deploy the code into testing and staging environments. And then finally, successfully apply infrastructure changes to your production. So both SAM, CloudFormation, and the next thing we're going to be talking about really do belong in a pipeline. All right, Cloud Development Kit, or CDK. Now, what is CDK, and why should I be talking about CDK? Well, let's say you're like me and you don't like JSON. You may notice that. Or YAML ain't your thing. YAML and its tab spacing is just horrible. Or maybe you are just some sort of a Python god and you want to use your Python skills to rule the world and also deploy some infrastructure, right? Why not use your Python skills? Why not use your existing skills to build your infrastructure? Why should I try to use a quasi language like JSON or YAML when I can use all the power that Python or some other language gives me? Well, this is where AWS CDK comes in. CDK gives you the ability to, instead of wasting your time, quote unquote, on doing things in YAML and JSON, while you already have the skills and the tools internally to do some other language, why not build your infrastructure in one of the generic languages? So CDK gives you the ability to build your code, to write your infrastructure, write and build your infrastructure in JavaScript, TypeScript, Java, Python, C#, F# actually, and Golang is actually coming quite soon. So all of these languages gives you the ability to actually deploy your infrastructure. So if you're experienced with one of these and you're starting with infrastructure as code, choose CDK. It's going to be much, much simpler because it's not just a matter of, oh, it's just a different type of syntax, but you can use all the best practices of that language, all the power of that language to actually deploy your infrastructure as code. Now, CDK is not some new thing. I mean, it is, but it actually relies on one thing. And what that thing that it relies on is actually CloudFormation. So CDK is a really nice interface, or it's a translator for your CloudFormation code. So how does it work? You create this thing called CDK apps. And in those apps, you have stacks, right? And in those stacks, you have resources which you define how you wish them to look. And finally, you have the CDK CLI. The CLI is the tool that does all the job. CDK CLI deploys and synthesizes your CloudFormation stacks. What it does, it actually takes that JavaScript or TypeScript or Python code, converts it to CloudFormation, and lets CloudFormation do it. Why is this good? Because we did not have to introduce another layer of complexity here to manage your infrastructure, because CloudFormation does it really good. Why invent something completely new when I can have CDK do that as well? I don't have a slide for that here, but CDK also supports Terraform. So if you are looking to launch things in GCP or Azure, or manage, I don't know, network switches, or run Chef stuff through Terraform, there is also a plugin for CDK that you can actually use some of these languages. I believe JavaScript and Python are supported right now to deploy Terraform code as well. So it was actually released by HashiCorp themselves. So pretty cool. Okay, so moving on. Takeaways. I have a bunch of things that I want you to remember today. Number one, get into infrastructure as code early. It doesn't matter if you're launching if I'm launching a small cluster of EC2 instances, right? Or I have a single container running, right? Anytime you launch anything on the cloud, do it in infrastructure as code. It will make your life much easier. I've spoken to many people who come to me like, hey, Darko, what is the easiest way for me to copy resources from account A to account B? There is none. Unless you have created your infrastructure in code, it's very difficult to replicate it anywhere. So do that. Even for a single instance, single autoscaling group, single ECS cluster, do it through infrastructure as code. It's going to be much easier. Treat your infrastructure code as any other code. Do not treat it special. It's not something that you run from your laptop. It needs to sit in a repository. It needs to go into a pipeline. It needs to be tested against and deployed into multiple environments. So treat it as your application code and use all the tools and best practices for that. And finally, use the tools that best fit your needs, right? Use the tool that does the job for you. Now, if you would ask me this, so Darko, what tool should I use? Should I use tool A or tool B? Yes. The best tool is the one you know how to use. And that same goes for I heard somebody say it on, the best programming language is the one you know. So use the tool that best fits your needs. Maybe you're doing something specific with serverless. Yes, there's a serverless SAM is great for that, for example, or the serverless framework. Maybe you want to deploy to different vendors. There's Terraform for that. Want to do multi-vendor stuff, but again, with generic programming languages, there's CDK for Terraform, and there's also Pulumi. When you do something specific in YAML and JSON, there's CloudFormation. So doesn't matter which tool you use. It's important that you use these things because they will get you a lot of benefit in the long run. I believe I'm on time. Thank you very much. This has been a very short presentation about infrastructure as code in general. If you want more deep dives into infrastructure as code, I have a few videos on my YouTube channel, so make sure to check it out. And also, I am doing these kinds of talks all over the place when it comes to infrastructure as code. So, and if you want to get more information, something, ask me, feel free to ping me directly on the social medias or whatever. Right. Thank you. I think that's it. I'm not sure if I will get any questions. I haven't had any questions from anybody in the chat, at least not that I can see. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Darko. Maxim is back on the virtual stage, but I can't start my video because it says you can start video because host stopped it. Okay, now I can do this. Let me click the button.
Okay,
yes,
got it.
I'm here. We don't have like direct and explicit questions in the chat so far, folks. Please catch up. Please send more questions. Darko will have a separate Q&A session in a few minutes.
Exactly.
So don't be shy. Ask Darko everything, and let's say be very practical. Let's say I have project A. What would you recommend me to do this to move it to EAC Rails? Be very practical. We are here to solve your problems. We are here not to present, right? We want to be very practical and useful for you. But there is an interesting discussion about languages folks want to use in infrastructure as code. I believe the most often mentioned I've seen is Python. Yes, that's interesting.
It's the best language, I guess, right?
A couple of mentions of Ruby, but I maybe not in that very positive context for some reason. And we have a question. Does Netflix use CDK?
I don't know. Like, I really don't know if Netflix does use CDK, but one of the things that we see a lot of people move through. I even have a couple of customer example that they've moved away from using traditional CloudFormation to use something like CDK because they have expertise in house. They have people who do Python and do TypeScript or whatever, and they can use that thing. But for Netflix, I really don't know about that too much. So
yeah, and in the comments, folks really want to know more about CDK, and Sebastian writes that it would be really cool to have some well-described example of moving large-scale code base to CDK, and again he's mentioned Netflix. So let's say like this: you, Darko, have 20-30 minutes to prepare your answers on this tough questions.
That's fine.
About a very practical large-scale example of infrastructure as code. Yeah. Meanwhile, we move on. And first, I want to say a couple of words about today's sponsor. We want to say thanks to the company called Intellias. It's a provider of full cycle software development services with offices in multiple towns: Kyiv, Lviv, Odessa, Kharkiv, Ivano-Frankivsk, Krakow, and Berlin. Also, Intellias has more than 17 years of experience in assembling and managing world-class engineering teams in Eastern Europe. And by the way, they are hiring. They're hiring senior and middle DevOps engineers. So learn from today's event, get practical experience if you don't have it, and submit your CV and join Intellias. You'll find all the details in the event description. Now, let's give a stage to a representative of Intellias, Dmytro Vedetskyi. Dmytro is a lead DevOps engineer at Intellias. And he has more than 10 years of experience. He's experienced AWS developer, and he's working with continuous deployment and integration, monitoring tools in different domains like healthcare, financial, and more. And he led DevOps teams of different sizes. He worked with big data clusters and automated their deployment. And he is developing and managing migrations of on-prem solutions to the cloud. But also he is a developer of plugin for Kafka monitoring called Zabbix, and the session will be about this tool. Dmytro, the stage is yours. Tell us about Kafka monitoring. Tell us about your plugin.
Hi guys. So I will share my presentation. I hope you are seeing it. 1 second. Yes. I hope you are seeing it. So thank you for your inviting me today. It's really great to be here. So let me introduce myself. I'm DevOps lead at Intellias with over 10 years of experience. So today I am going to explain how the way how we can monitoring Kafka service. So let's start. As for the agenda of today's presentation, we will talk about following. We will overview Kafka and Zabbix services, define issues that Kafka could have, and we will see the solution that helps to avoid such issues with some examples. So first of all, as you know, Kafka is a modern, powerful, and fancy service which provides storing and managing messages for real-time data processing. Here is a schema of how Kafka works on the high level. So, next slide shows deeper architecture of Kafka. Basically Kafka has 4 parts: brokers, zookeeper, producers, brokers that manages messages, producers send records, and consumer just consumes records which producer sends. But unfortunately, Kafka has no monitoring tool by default. And sometimes when Kafka has issues, we should define and fix issues ASAP to prevent interruption, losing data, and make sure that our services work properly. I will show how to do it during the presentation. What about Zabbix? As you know, Zabbix is an open source monitoring software tools for different components, including network services, servers, virtual machines, cloud services, and so on. It's very useful and as I mentioned, open source solution. So what about issues? What kind of issues Kafka might have? So sometimes it could be hardware issues, slow disk write and read data, slow network capacity, and not enough memory. Other Kafka service issues can be with configuration. It's not configured properly and tuned not enough for your load. Next one, it could be issues with topic configuration. It's replication factors, number for partition, rotation policy, cleanup policy, and others. And last one, it's issues with consumers. Not everybody knows how to configure correct number of consumers. Sometimes your solution or microservice hasn't enough consumers and can't consume data so fast as you need. But how we can prevent these issues? First of all, we should monitoring our hardware, use Zabbix plugin for the monitoring, Kafka service, monitoring brokers and topics, and last one, it's monitoring consumers to see if they don't have any lags or delays for processing data. So for the hardware monitoring, by default, Zabbix has a really good template for Linux monitoring, for example, and it covers everything. It's CPU, memory, disks, without discovering this disks. When you add some additional disk, it will automatically add it and start monitoring without any manual work, additional manual work, and so on, and networks as well. It's default configuration and default metrics which Zabbix provides, but you can easily add whatever you want. It's not so difficult to edit template and add additional metrics. Next one, it's about the Kafka monitoring. So Zabbix has possibility to collect and evaluate GMX metrics by default. You shouldn't install like additional services instead of Kafka GMX monitoring. It's called like not Kafka. It's called Zabbix Java Gateway. This gateway collects metrics from brokers and delivers all of them to the Zabbix server. Then Zabbix saves it and evaluate data. When Kafka has some issues, Zabbix sends alert and send notification to specific people or person, or you can see the information using Zabbix web user interface. On other slide, I will provide examples with the screenshots of the dashboards and graphics and so on. Here is the explanation about GMX metrics. I would say that is the default GMX monitoring. Kafka uses Yammer metrics, and by default, it supports a lot of the default metrics, Java metrics. Here you can see the diagram of the consumer monitoring. As you can see, architecture is similar for the GMX, except a couple of components. The main application that evaluates consumer status is Borrow. Borrow is official LinkedIn monitoring tool. Zabbix collecting metrics from the Borrow and evaluate them. So we can see status of the logs and consumer status as well. So Zabbix makes alerting if some consumer has a huge lag, consumer can't process messages, and can process some messages for some reason, and so on. What required this monitoring tool? This monitoring tool tested on Zabbix 4.4 plus. It's some of the new version of Zabbix. Kafka version 2. Plus, and the latest Borrow and Kafka Manager. Now it calls like it's renamed. So I will show some examples of the metrics that we can collect. Here is hardware metrics. CPU, as you can see, disks, and load average, for example. This is example of the graphics of this matrix. It's available memory and network interface. As you can see, the load of the interface. This is Kafka GMX matrix that Zabbix collects. It's a specific matrix. For example, it's very important to know about under-replicated partition, so we can see it here and get alert if something went wrong with this matrix. Here is Kafka manager user interface that shows topics and their status about offsets, as you can see, a number of partitions. This user interface very useful when you have a lot of the topics. You can see status of the topics, and you shouldn't use CLI console or some scripts to manage the topics. You can update them using user interface as well. Here is example of the consumer matrix that Zabbix discovers automatically as well. So here is, as I mentioned, about total log status and consumer logs offsets per topic. And the status of the consumers as well. Here is, for example, like it's okay, it is working correct. You can see here a combined graphic that shows status of the topic logs. Graphics generated automatically as well when you added new topic. You will have the graphics per topic, and it's very easy to see the load of the topics and the logs and offsets as well. Dashboard is very useful as well. So you can see problems with the current cluster. For example, it shows the consumer has log, and you will see the status of the this borrow service or consumers. And in general, you can see the picture of your all infrastructures. The last one slide shows status per topic. Log 0 means that each message was processed read, and everything is working as we need it. And you can see, for example, the partitions and how many logs they have per each partition. As you can see, Kafka monitoring is very easy and useful for everyone who use Kafka. You can prevent a lot of the problems if you use this solution. I think that's almost it what I wanted to share with you. Here is some URLs, links that you used for the that I used for the presentation. Thank you for your attention. If you have any question, feel free to ask me.
Thank you very much, Dmytro. Very insightful. Lots of interesting information. I haven't seen direct questions about Zabbix in our comments, but I have some questions for you. So Zabbix project is an open source project you drive, you maintain, right?
Yes.
Cool. And I bet you heard about a global initiative called Hacktoberfest. This is really global motion to inspire people to contribute to open source projects. And I think your project and you as maintainer could be a really good example of what open source can achieve. And a couple of questions for you about that. So do you need some contributions to Zabbix from technical community, from the global community?
I will think about it. I just can't say for now.
Okay, but it's somewhere on GitHub, right? So folks can go and
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can pull my plugin, and it has documentation provided information how you can deploy this solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I already created some specific topic in the Medium, and you can read this information as well with some examples. How does it work? It's very easy and useful, I think so, because I use it, and it helps on some cases.
Great. And the last question from me: how do you want to gather feedback about your project? Is it okay if folks open issues? Will you read these issues? Will you somehow reply to this?
Yes, for sure. I have some contributors in my GitHub, and they already created some issues, and I made some pull requests by me and by my contributors as well. So it's not a big deal to support.
Amazing. Well, this is how open source should work, and I encourage you, Dmytro, to maybe mark some issues like beginner friendly for folks who want to start contributing to your project. Yeah, let's involve the power of global technical community. Thank you very much, and time for us to move on. And it's time now for Fireside Chat. And I want to invite to our virtual stage our technical expert from Google Cloud Platform, from GCP, Nikhil Barthwal. Nikhil, are you here? Do you hear me?
Yes,
do you see me?
I can hear you. Thank you very much for your welcome. Delighted to be here.
Cool. So which time zone are you in?
I'm actually in Pacific time zone. I'm based out of Seattle. So this is like my morning 9:30, 9:40, 9:50 actually. I lost track of my
morning.
Yeah,
Somewhere
quite convenient. Yeah.
Morning in America, evening in Europe, and I believe late night in Asia. Yeah, we are a global event. Let me briefly introduce Nikhil, what information I have about you. You are passionate about building distributed systems. Nikhil has several years of work experience in both large companies and smaller startups, and acts as mentor in startups. Currently, he's tech lead at Google Cloud Platform, working on Knative. And outside of work, he's speaking at local and global meetups like now, and international conferences, and on topics related to distributed systems and programming languages. And welcome again. And we dedicate our next 20 minutes or so to the topic which was announced when we announced this event: DevSecOps, or secure DevOps, or DevOps with security. There are tons of names and definitions of this very interesting concept. And of course, I really want to hear from you, dear attendees, dear watchers. So of course I have some questions to Nikhil, and believe me, we can spend not 20 minutes but 20 hours discussing DevSecOps. But this will be our problem solved, right? We want to solve your problems, so use the chat and use it now. There is only slight delay between what I see on air and what you see on YouTube stream, so it's almost real time, so I will react on your questions quite immediately. But let's set the stage first. DevSecOps. How do you understand it? How let's say how would you explain this to a very junior developer or DevOps engineer? What is DevSecOps in your understanding, Nikhil?
So to me, DevOps in general solves a problem of breaking down the silos. That's an overall goal of right? So people have to stop thinking themselves as we are the developers, we are the testers, we are the deployment goes, we are the operation folks, and see themselves as DevOps is basically a chain, and we are all part of it, and our goal is to build a great product or enhance a great product, whatever. So to me, DevSecOps is basically another part of another link on the chain that now we are bringing security into the considerations. And I can give more specific examples of how I know we can talk about the shift left strategy, but essentially bringing security on board and saying, well, we talked about development and testing aspects, we talked about deployment, now we talk about security. And the key aspect of DevSecOps is security is everybody's responsibility. It is not a responsibility for developers or testers or deployers. It's everybody's shared responsibility. So that's what DevSecOps really is bringing onto the table, bringing security, shifting it, call it left, right, whatever, essentially making it essential part of your chain.
Great. I fully support this definition, and I fully support the statement about security is shared responsibility. So it's no longer something that, oh, there is a security team, they will do everything. No, it's not true for modern projects with current speed of development, which is like super rapid, right? We also had some questions from folks who registered for this event, and we had the special text area on the registration form for the question to the speakers. And the first question will be, and by the way, this will be a really great bridge to Darko's session about AWS. So there is a tool called AWS as CDK, right? Is there something similar for Google Cloud? And the person who wrote this question elaborated a bit, or you as a GCP evangelize towards Terraform as a tool for IAC. What's your take? What's Google take on that?
To the best of my knowledge, I don't think, and I attended Darko's talk in the morning, so there isn't anything equivalent to CDK. Now, Darko did mention Pulumi, and I haven't used Pulumi myself, and I haven't looked into the details, but to my understanding, Pulumi is multi-cloud. So you could, again, don't quote me on this because I haven't really had a first-hand experience with Pulumi, but you could do what you want to do with AWS CDK with Pulumi on GCP, I would think so. In fact, in some sense, I think Pulumi is better in the sense that it's more flexible in the sense it's multi-cloud, right? Honestly, and I know Google would hate me for saying this, but if I was using GCP, I still don't want to go into a vendor lock-in anyway. So even if there was a solution, I would still probably prefer a common solution where I'm multi-cloud, where I'm not vendor locked, as opposed to a Google official solution, unless Google gives me something very specific that Pulumi doesn't really have, which I don't think is the case.
Yeah, it's no surprise at all. There is no single customer who wants to be locked to anything, right? So yeah, that's a good answer. Folks, I don't see questions from your side. Then let me ask you, our attendees. We are more than 100 folks who are watching us. If we zoom out a bit from DevSecOps and look at more like general DevOps. So what's on your mind? What do you think is more important in DevOps? And of course, DevSecOps as part of this, tools or culture? So think about this and write in our chat and let's discuss. There is no right answer. We have one more quite specific technical question sent to us during registration form, and I cannot ignore this. How do you measure the error budget in OWASP definitions, WRT or DRW?
Okay, so should I answer the tools culture part first,
yes. To sparkle discussion, what's your answer on tools versus culture?
So my answer is that I don't see them as two separate things. I see them as same thing. They have to evolve together. And because to me, culture is basically best practices, and tools is what supports that best practice. So I'll give an example of that. And it's actually a very good example of shifting left strategy that I was working with the startup. And, it's an online startup, e-business startup. Security is a big concern. And, there is a very common problem with input sanitization, right? SQL cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and all those things. And they wanted basically every developer to think about it. So he said, well, we want every developer who basically checks in the code to think about what are the ways security can be hacked. So we need to bring this culture. How do we bring this culture? And how do we enforce that is happening? So as the tooling team lead, I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's build tools that use static analysis and that can trace the path and detect if there's a violation. And we'll put the tools in basically the pipeline, right? So every time you check in or before you check in, those tools would run on your code and make sure that there's no violation. And if there's a violation, we don't let you check in. So to me, this is an example. Obviously, this is a good example of shifting left in the sense that you have migrated that security settings to individual developers checking. But it is also a very good example of this tool versus culture thing that you want to bring in the culture and you have the tools to enforce that culture. So you could make a statement saying, hey, security is a shared responsibility. That means nothing. I mean, okay, what do I do? Is it something actionable that I have to do, right? People want an actionable step. What tools gives you is a specific actionable step. You can't do, you have every input that comes from an external, you have to validate, right? If you don't, we don't let you check in. Our tools would ensure that. So this is like tool enforcing the culture. So to me, tools and culture are the same thing that evolves together and they reimpose each other as opposed to saying, should I do the culture first or should I do the tools first? I mean, there are certain cases where you can't build tools for certain things like, clean readable code. I mean, I can't have tools to enforce clean readable code, right? So there are obviously exceptions, but in general, I don't really see them as two separate things. I see them as one thing because I believe that anything that you cannot enforce on your pipeline is not a rule, or it basically means nothing because it's not an actionable thing.
Yeah, this is true, and we have some not questions but comments. So folks vote for culture first, and I love the comments. DevOps is state of mind and soul. Yeah, so it's soul, like part of culture, and mind, I believe, more practical. DevSecOps is how real senior DevOps should look like. And I'd say also real senior developer should look like, right? So after all, there is dev part in DevSecOps. Okay. So I think it's really great discussion, and we can spend tons of time in this interesting chats. But let's go back to this very practical question about error budgets in OWASP. Folks who don't know what is OWASP, this is Open Web Application Security Project. This is online community which produces standards and recommendations around how to properly implement security. So it's whole foundation, and it introduces different, let's say, metrics for how to measure your security. So what's your take on these error budgets?
Okay. First of all, I think we are mixing multiple things here. Measuring security and error budgets are two different things. Now, let's actually drill down into error budgets, or what error budget basically is, or what's the origin of error budget. There is a natural tension between dev and ops, right? Dev wants to push features, ops wants to stability. So error budget is basically a compromise that the dev and ops have reached, saying this is what we are going to compromise. So dev says, well, this is the maximum we are going to tolerate downtime. We can't ship more features. Ops says, well, this is the maximum rate at which we can basically ship. So to me, error budget is not something that you measure. Error budget is something that you decide, right? So I am going to decide that this is the compromise between the dev and ops. The other thing, the OSP is basically a set of metrics that measure your web performance, but there's a difference between the decisions you make and how you measure. So coming back to error budget is something that an external person, basically it impacts the external person, whereas DRM and things like that are internal. If there is a fault, how do I fix it? I mean, there are great security parameters that you can measure in your organization, but I think they are fundamentally a little bit different from error budget. Because error budget is, the purpose of error budget is basically to balance the dev and ops part of it. Now, how would you measure? I mean, measuring error budgets in terms of site reliability is pretty easy. Downtime, right? This is the amount of downtime you do. Security, little bit tricky, but again, the characteristic of error budget is it's externally visible to customers. How much time does it take for you to, like, I think it's defect remedial window, DRW. How much time does it take to fix a defect? As an external customer, I don't care. To me, what matters is the downtime. To me, from a security point of view, error budget would be something like, okay, against a DDoS attack, how much is my buffer? Right? That's something that's a parameter that I can take into my error budget. How much am I lying? Because again, it's a natural tension between dev and ops, right? And ops wants to have replications and so on. Infrastructure management, devs have certain things. This is the amount of infrastructure we'll use for this. So error budgets, let's not confuse error budgets with things like DRW. They're somewhat of two different things. Now, coming back to your question, things like downtime, buffer against DDoS, these are typical characteristics that you could probably go into error budget. That seems to me as a more likely candidate. DRW is more about, okay, when I have a problem, what are the parameters that I need to measure to have effectiveness of my practices and internal tools and processes, how effective they are, which is different from error budgets. That's what things like DRW or the WRT, weighted risk, I forgot the full form, but it's something like a weighted risk, that you basically have different chains and you have risks and you attach weights to it. These are, again, measurements of the internal processes, whereas error budget is concerned about external process, external visible to customers.
Yeah, very well explained. Thanks for this clarification. We have some questions from our attendees. So, Nikhil, you have said that SEC is a part of the ops process, has to be part of this. Where would you suggest to put this SEC inside this process?
I'd say
maybe like the next question is somehow similar. Maybe let's take two at the same time. So where do we put SEC inside this process? And also Slavko is asking, is DevSecOps next stage of DevOps evolution, or just an extension of DevOps as an implementation of security best practices? So what do you think? Where to start and where is this?
So first of all, we just discussed security is everybody's responsibility. Yeah. So again, I wouldn't say that if it's an ABC step and you put security, I would say security permeates all the stages. So where to put it? I'd say put it everywhere. I want to put security in my requirement stage because I want to take into consideration security aspects when I design the requirements. Most of the time, there's something faulty in requirements that I find out where implementation is. Also, another aspect of DevOps that we have to take care of, one of the things about agile processes in general that DevOps enforces, fail fast. Failing early in your cycle is basically cheaper than failing late. So if there's a security issue in my requirements, I want to find out in the requirements also. So the simple answer to this question is security should be in every stage wherever it makes sense. It should make sense in my requirement. It should make sense in my design, right? For example, one of the things, one of the distributed systems I was designing was basically using push versus pull architecture, right? You have information in various servers and a monitoring system is pulling that information. So should I use a push model or should I use a pull model? And pull model was more effective, but we ended up using push model. Why? Because of security consideration. Why? Because if your key for your pull mechanism is leaked, all your servers are compromised. Whereas if in the push model, where individual servers are pushing it to the central system, if the key is compromised, it only compromises that particular part. So this is a good example of security right at the design stage. You take your design, whether I should, like, you're monitoring a system, you have a central monitoring tool that pulls metrics from various endpoints, and you have all these endpoints. Should I pull or should I push? Security basically decides push is better than pull, right? So an example of security at the design stage. You could have a security at the requirement stage. I just gave an example of the shifting left, right? Right at the implementation set, input sanitization. Testing stage, same thing. When I'm doing my integration testing, I need to do security testing also. So again, the fundamental idea of DevOps is that security is not an isolated thing, but a shared responsibility. So to me, security is everywhere. It's not where do I put it? It's more like where can I put it? I should put it where I can put it, where it makes sense. And if it makes sense at ABC stage, I should put it at ABC stage.
Cool. Yeah, totally agree. By the way, recently I watched video from the conference. I think it was Black Hat conference, something like this. There is a session called DevSecOps, What, Why, and How. I don't remember the speaker name, but he really illustrated that security part is everywhere on every single stage of DevOps. Like starting from developer, you have you can set up pre-commit hooks and IDE plugins, which will already start help you to think about security, right? To introduce proper tooling. On the level of code repo, you might want to use secrets management. On your CI/CD server, on pre-built, tons of stuff you can inject to shift left to start think about security and fail as early as possible. Static application security testing, source composition analysis, like package analysis, everything. On post-build, during runtime, dynamic application security testing. On artifact repository, build artifact versioning. On Q&A staging, their own security tools. On production, own security tools, plus logging, monitoring, everything. So literally, folks, there is no single step in DevOps where you can say, oh, there is no place for security. Do you agree with that, Nikhil?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just gave an example of security at design and implementation. I mean, and obviously testing is kind of obvious. You want to do security testing there itself. So again, taking back, this is where the whole idea of DevOps is. Like I said, the very definition, the very purpose of DevOps and Agile is breaking silos. So you have to stop thinking that I am a developer, I am a tester, I am a security guy. That's not thinking. You have to think about the product, what all is needed, and how and when you should contribute what, or what should you do to make that product better, right? So the philosophy, security everywhere, resonates with that philosophy that break the silos. And just everything, wherever it makes sense for you to consider security, consider it. Great
words. And to wrap up our discussion, to summarize, let me and to confirm your words, and to confirm that folks, all of you who watch us, who take who have any relation with development and operations, are part of security. There was research done recently by the company called White Source. If I remember correctly, this company is building the tool to check security issues in the external dependency you use. So they asked lots of developers who owns the day-to-day operational responsibility for application security in your organization. Like day-to-day application security, right? And the main groups of job titles are DevOps, security teams, developers, and team leaders in software development teams. So once again, four groups: DevOps, security teams, developers, and team leads. And guess what? I will not read exact percentage, but they are really close to each other. So it's almost like 25%, 25, 25, 25. the border between responsibility for security is really blurry. So it almost there is almost no border. So we all involved in security, starting from very single first line of code, and even before, right? Starting from building something on paper and even in your mind. So be mindful about security, and tools, great tools are here to help you. But let's start with building DevSecOps culture in our companies. Thank you very much, Nikhil, for joining our event. It was great pleasure to chat with you. And then
we had short time, but if people have questions, they can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever, and email also. So just shoot me an email, not a problem.
Yes. I asked dear organizers to put Nikhil's contact Twitter or email or something to the chat. So yes, please, let's continue the discussion. What's next on our Cloud Builders show? Next, I want to ask you, kindly ask you to join our community, and we run a Telegram channel. You will find the link soon again in the comments or in the event description. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel, so you will receive a reminder about next event. What's next? Next, I invite Darko again to our stage, and I've seen that you sent lots of extra questions, and I believe next 15 minutes or so, Darko will be busy by answering them. Darko, are you here? Do you hear me? Do you see me?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I think. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I think because my video was disabled, I couldn't talk. I couldn't show up on screen. So. Excellent. Thank you, Maxim. I guess I can kick off the Q&A, right? Yeah, cool. So I do have a bunch of questions on chat, and thank you very much. And I was passed them by the folks from Cloud Builders. Let me just, make sure to join the Telegram channel. I'm also on the Telegram channel, so you can reach me there as well if you want to chat with me directly on that side. Let me try to post something in chat if I can. I posted a message now in chat that you can see my YouTube channel. So if you want to see more of technical talks from me in a more, like say, longer approach, check it out. But let's get to the questions. A bunch of questions from you, and I really much appreciate it. So let's have a look. Something that Sebastian Nowak has asked, that would be really nice that we can see a much bigger CDK example, like a larger scale CDK code, not just super simple hello world examples. Well, actually, the CDK community is massive, right? So, and I think on the 30th of, next week, yes, the 30th of September, there's the CDK day as well. So you can register it for free, and a lot of great CDK speakers will be available there. But also my colleague Kobus and I are working on something on our streaming series where we are building a fully fledged, well-architected application workload on AWS by using AWS CDK. So we're trying to make something more than a hello world there. So absolutely. Somebody asked, what microphone am I using? I am using the Marantz MPM 1000. I believe it was 50 euros on Amazon. That's about it. It's nothing super expensive. It's a relatively cheap microphone. The only thing is it is actually a condenser microphone, so it uses that like 3-prong XLR input. So I have an XLR audio card here, and it works great. I also use like a one of these things, the small ones, but I only use them when I have to record something in the back. So yeah. What else? Somebody asked 2 words, please, about CDK role and functional. No, I'm not sure what that means, Slavko. Slavko asked that, but maybe you can elaborate that in chat right now, and I'll be happy to answer that. what do I think about the serverless framework? I've never used the serverless framework for any production workloads, but it is very good. I mean, to be honest, serverless framework uses CloudFormation as well. So, so if you are, serverless framework actually is the predecessor of SAM. So it came before SAM, and it is also as equally good. It's an open source tool. Again, there's a massive community behind serverless, and I think when it comes to serverless applications on AWS and your ability to write them in infrastructure as code, serverless framework and SAM are really two great choices. So they have very similar syntax. Oh, actually, serverless is also in YAML. So yeah, it looks similar, right? It's not a fully blown language. Okay, this is a loaded question by N. Cherno. So Darko, you very much like text. What is the best text editor? You know that the wars were started for that question, but absolutely the best text editor is Vim. Yeah. Okay, so I'm the biggest fan of Vim. Let me say that. But I would say the best text editor is the one that this is the best non-answer ever. It's the best text editor. Best text editor is the one that serves you the best. So if you are doing a lot of development and you're not very familiar with like Vim and all the stuff, and you wish to have all the plugins in the world, I think Microsoft's Visual Studio Code is just the bee's knees, as they say, right? The best thing out there. But if you're like a minimalist and like, oh, I hate bloat like myself, you just go ahead and just use Vim. So I would say the VS Code is definitely, dare I say it, one of the best pieces of software that came out recently. So VS Code is for sure my suggestion, and has so many plugins for different things, including infrastructure as code. So if you want to do CloudFormation, if you want to do Terraform, if you want to do whatever, VS Code has all the tools you need to get started. But if you like to run things in a terminal, if you would like to do all the things in a very limited environment, you know, no bloat, then yeah, Vim or, well, not Emacs. Emacs is an operating system, so no. Okay. Do you also use Ansible and Terraform for infrastructure as code? Okay, so Terraform, absolutely. And actually on my YouTube channel, there's a 4-part stream series in 4 episodes where I learned Terraform live. So I have never used Terraform in live before. And I decided one day, because I was discussing it with my colleague, I was discussing it with my colleague and about Terraform, and I'm like, I don't know Terraform. You've been talking about Terraform. I'm like, I don't really know what that is. Well, I don't know how it functions. So I decided, like, you know what? Let me learn Terraform, and let me learn it live on stream. So I went up on Twitch, and there was a bunch of people there, and like spent 2 hours each stream on trying to kind of learn how Terraform functions and how should I use it. So it's fun. I think I have not used Ansible for that. I've used Ansible for configuring operating systems. So I place Ansible in more of configuration as code, right? So if you need to configure something on top of an operating system, like install packages, configure users, or whatnot, Ansible is great for that. But Ansible, at least the last time I tried it for these things, is not very good when it comes to deploying infrastructure. Because if you have an Ansible playbook and you define, I want 10 EC2 instances, and you run that playbook twice, you're going to have 2 times 10 instances. So it's not idempotent, as they say. So, but Terraform, absolutely. There is also a couple of questions here. Is it better to use Terraform? Now, the best framework is the best, the one that you know the most. Now, if you have requirements to run things on GCP, on Azure, even if you want to configure like some specific network switches, or if you just prefer HashiCorp language or HCL, Terraform is a great tool out there, right? So Terraform, and to be fairly honest, comparing Terraform and CloudFormation, I like Terraform more. Terraform has an amazing syntax. It's easier to read, especially compared to JSON. So Terraform is much, much better in that sense. So I would highly encourage you that if you're considering, oh, I'm not going to use CloudFormation because it's vendor lock and bloat, use Terraform. It's equally as good. There are some issues with Terraform when it comes to managing state files and a whole lot of different problems with Terraform, but there's also problems with CloudFormation. So I have a question here in chat right now from Victor. Why do you hate JSON? My hatred for JSON comes from a time when CloudFormation could only be written in JSON. So imagine having a 50 kilobyte file of JSON code. with no comment inside. You cannot put comments in JSON. So parsing a massive JSON file with no comments, with very complex resource configurations, is something that caused me to sleep bad at night. And you can imagine this. So on an EC2 instance, if you create it through CloudFormation, you can add this thing called user data. And user data is just a script, like just a shell script that will run when you boot your instance. And imagine having to put like a 50-line bash script in JSON. You have to escape each line, or just write one big old line, but that doesn't work. So you have to escape each line. It's it's horrible to look at. So I think JSON is an amazing object notation. Don't get me wrong. JSON is great for passing on data. JSON is great for robots, but not for people. Cool. I have not tried Pulumi, so I've actually never played around with Pulumi, but Pulumi has a similar approach to CDK. It uses generic programming languages. It has support for multiple cloud vendors, so it can actually deploy resources and infrastructure to different cloud vendors. One thing to note, and this applies to Terraform as well, there is no such a solution that you can take one piece of code and deploy it to every cloud vendor. That just doesn't work, right? And there was also a comment here when migrating from AWS to GCP about using CloudFormation to move to GCP. No matter which framework you're using, you still have to write separate code for a separate cloud vendor, because the way Azure launches their instances and the way GCP does and AWS, it's not the same thing. So you always need to convert code. So, but Pulumi is great because it gives you the ability to do all of those things. Now, that being said, with Terraform support in beta or alpha on CDK, you can use Terraform as well to launch Azure resources within CDK. So that's really cool. And I like CDK because it's one thing that CDK has that compared to Pulumi that Pulumi doesn't. CDK has a massive community. And CDK has this thing called patterns. And patterns are just predefined or well-architected, super opinionated way to launch things. So if you ever wanted to launch like an ECS Fargate cluster behind a load balancer on AWS, you can do it with CDK with 3 lines of code, right? So they're already built, there already exist those patterns. If you want to launch a multi-account code pipeline, deployment pipeline, you can do it with 15 lines of code with a CDK pattern, all built by the community. So and it is very, very cool. So let me have a look. So Slavko asks, how CDK actually helps you to manage infra? Which processes does it improve, make faster and simpler? Slavko, let me try to share screen because I've actually prepared something. Almost. Share. Well, bam. It's better for you to look into in my terminal than look at me. So let me actually show you something, Slavko. Have you ever created a VPC on AWS? Manually, right? There's a wizard. You can click a bunch of buttons, it creates a VPC for you. Or if you don't use a wizard, you need to create a VPC, a subnet, an internet gateway, a route table association, and you need to create a route in that route table, right? What if I told you you can do all of that from CDK and, well, let's actually do it. So TMP, mkdir, VPC, CDK, VPC, CDK, init. Let's use TypeScript. That's fine. I'm going to initialize a CDK application right now, completely blank. And let's try to install, let's create a VPC from CDK. Takes a moment. This is not the problem, CDK. This is NPM, right? And everybody loves NPM and node packages. Takes so long to do. Okay, cool. So if I do npm install AWS CDK EC2, like so, this should be fine, I think. There's a new version of CDK, so this might be a problem, but let me do this right now. So install this. Moment, like so, perfect. Vim, CDK, actually, let me open Vim. Again, the best text editor in the world. Open up Vim, edit this, Vim, let's open up this and go to packages, JSON, like that. I want to edit one of these things. Just use the old version, rm rf node modules. I want to remove this, npm install. I just want to make sure I'm using the same version of node packages all across the world because I don't want to do this again. So I've initialized the application in CDK. I've installed a single node package, and I'm going to edit lib. What is this? This one. I want to create a VPC. Just do that. EC2 from AWS EC2 like so. Oops. Like that. And let's create a VPC. VPC const VPC equals new EC2.VPC, not VPN, VPC, this my VPC. This single line will create a VPC with 4 subnets, 2 public, 2 private, 2 NAT gateways, 2 public IP addresses, all the bells and whistles you need to do to have a proper VPC in infrastructure as code. So if you ever created a VPC in CloudFormation, and it took you like 90 lines of code to do it in CloudFormation, and it took you like a bunch of clicks and hoping you did everything okay on like the console, on the web interface, and if not using the wizard, of course, and it took you just this much time to deploy it using CDK live on stage. So I think CDK does help me a lot. It's so much, like everything I do right now on AWS, I do it through CDK because it makes it so much easier. And like I had a webinar not so long ago, and I had to create like simple demos like autoscaling groups and Route 53 and all those stuff. What I did is I literally went here and I created a, where is it? Building in the cloud. I created 4 CDK repositories. Actually 4 CDK applications that creates a RDS database, a Route 53 stuff, and some ALB web service. It's so easier for me to do it like this than to do it through clicking, because I've been doing infrastructure as code so long that I forgot where I need to click as well. So while this is creating, let me actually try to answer some more questions. Okay, so there's a question from Yuri Adamovich. Question is, hello, Darko. For example, we described infrastructure in Terraform, but time to cloud providers upgrade resources, after which our code doesn't work until we update properties. How do we improve that? So I cannot say about any specific cloud provider, but one of the things that I can say that AWS never changes its APIs. So if you ever used SimpleDB, I'm not sure how many of you did, but SimpleDB used to be a product on AWS. It doesn't exist anymore. No new user, no new customer can use it. But if you ever used that before, it's still there. And the API is still the same, because let me teach you one truth in the world. APIs are forever. You never should change an API. But if some cloud vendor or somebody else that you're using is changing APIs, the proper solution, especially if you're using some tool, some good framework for deploying your infrastructure like Terraform, you need to constantly be deploying. So one of the tools we have, it's called TaskCat. I'm not sure if it's a CloudFormation tool, but there are similar ones like for CloudFormation. TaskCat is a tool that basically constantly deploys your templates to an environment. It deploys it, sees if it is successful, tears it down. And if you have like a collection of templates that need to be, kind of maintained and used, you will constantly keep on deploying them and tearing them down just to make sure they're not broken. Because the time you do not want this to figure out that this doesn't work is the time when you need it. So you want to make sure you figure out it's broken way before you need it. So my suggestion here is just go ahead and test your templates often. Do it automatically, bring them up, tear them down, just to make sure that they still work. And I think that's all the questions I had today. One comment I want to add to the previous discussion between Maxim and Nikhil. There's no such thing as a DevOps engineer. I've learned that. I've been on a few conferences where people would tell me there is no such thing as a DevOps engineer. DevOps exists. And nobody is able to define DevOps in a very clear way, but DevOps engineers do not exist. So yeah, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Okay. if there's no more questions on chat, because I don't see any questions coming in, thank you, Maxim.
Thank you very much, Darko. So you did the double job today. Great. And I still see you fresh and energized.
I still have 2 videos to record. So yeah.
Lucky. Okay, thank you very much. And we move on. And actually, folks, we have only few announcements left, and these are really cool announcements. On this stage, I want to invite representative of our today's sponsor company called Intellias, Oksana Chai. She's talent marketing coordinator. And I want to invite her on this virtual stage to ask her to actually raffle the prize, the giveaway of our main partner, Intellias. Oksana, are you here?
Yeah, hello. Thanks, Maxim, for introducing me. Yeah, I'm really Oksana. This is very quick hello and very quick announcement. I just need to, bring this spirit of real old good days conferences which we had previously before all this lockdown and everything. And this is the kind of, I want to bring it, it's this prize raffle. But you know what? At first, I want very quickly to remind you about ourselves. I mean, Intellias is a company, because I really want you to remember us, and in any live situation when we will meet, you will know and say, oh yeah, I remember Intellias was participating in this Cloud Builders gig. So we are a Ukrainian company, and I will present it like like this. We are more than 18 years on the market. Basically working like an outsourcing company, but trying to do some R&D also. We have offices in Ukraine and outside Ukraine. We are inputting in those development using the best techniques which is available for developers. We are engaged in many fields of like location-based services, automotive, agricultural, and so on and so forth. We are also proud to work with so buzz names as Deloitte, Brainstorm, Nokia, and so on and so forth. And as to this prize raffle, we were going to present and to do it online right here, right now, but unfortunately, I see that not too many of you registered to this raffle. So I am here to encourage you, please. We are going to do this prize raffle tomorrow in Telegram by Cloud Builders Telegram channel, and there you will see the results at 3 p.m. So by this time, please register and have this very tasty prize which we prepared for you. And I think that everything will be very nice. And any of you who left your contacts will and win the prize, we will contact you directly and present this and send you. That's it.
Oh, smart you, Oksana. So you mentioned 3 p.m., but we cannot say like this. We are a global community. Who cares 3 p.m. Which time zone?
Eastern Europe. Sorry, yeah, I remember.
Europe. So yeah, you can easily translate it, folks, to your time zone, 3 p.m. Eastern Europe time. I ask dear organizers to put the link to registration for this raffle again, while we have more than 70 people still online, still watching us. And let's wrap up the technical part of the event to go to social part of the event. I want to say huge thanks to all today's participants. First of all, to all of you folks who watched us, who sent the questions, to all our dear speakers. They voluntarily contributed their time to prepare presentations, to find the time for joining our live discussion. And of course, organizers, I appreciate the efforts organizers of Cloud Builders do to keep this event cloud vendor agnostic. So this is second event in a row when they have representatives from multiple cloud vendor companies. Great job, folks. We are community, we are technical folks. We want to listen about tech from all the companies around the cloud. Okay, so what's next? Next, Zoom. So folks, before that, you were only able to communicate with me, with speakers, with organizers via text in the comments. Now we want you to be main drivers of the event, and we want to invite you all to our Zoom channel. Again, I hope that organizers will remind you the link right here in the comments. And yes, basically that's it. We want to wrap up this video stream, and if you have some extra time right now, join us, and let's continue our discussion there. On that, thank you very much. Maxim Salnikov from Microsoft Norway was here with you this almost 2 hours. Let's stay connected. I hope this is my not last appearance at Cloud Builders, and have a great day, evening, night ahead. Bye-bye, folks.